There are two worlds living side by side on cruise ships. The one that you live in as a guest, everyone smiles and nothing is too much trouble, and the one that the crew live in below deck, the real world. Make yourself comfortable whilst you can. Here, ladies and gentlemen, we go. Before I stepped on board to start my first contract, I thought that racism was a thing that people remember from football matches in the 1980s. Day one on Aurora, I realised that it's still alive and well out there on the water. When I nipped to the crew mess for a quick bite before my first shift, the entire canteen went silent as I dropped my plate on a table and went to grab a coffee. The sight of a white Englishman taking a seat at a Filipino table was so wild to people who knew the rules. It was like a scene from a western when the baddie walks into the saloon and everybody freezes. Obviously, on day one, I didn't know that certain departments only sit, speak, and socialise with certain other departments, like the museum canteen scene from Friends. Once I realised that was the case, obviously it made no difference to me at all. I would sit wherever and do chatting on whoever was unlucky enough to be nearby at the time. There are no official rules about who can sit with who and that kind of thing, but it just is how it is. This could just be a byproduct of different departments being staffed by agencies from different parts of the world. Birds of a feather do flock together, and far from home it's probably comforting to be surrounded by people who share your culture and language. Of course, there are official rules about who can go where and what they can do when they're not working. These are called deck privileges. As a shoppy and a white British man, the only real rules I had to follow were to wear the dress code of the day, have my name badge on, and don't use the casino. If I wanted to see a show or a movie, go to any of the bars for a drink, I don't drink, or go to Carmen's for a dance, I don't dance, then that was fine. But were I, say, an Indian waiter or a Filipino cabin steward, well, free time is not quite so rosy. They were not allowed to be seen in guest areas without requesting a special exception. For these crew members, life outside of work is spent in crew areas only. White metal walls, white metal ceilings, fluorescent light tubes, and a lot of sitting around in corridors eating instant noodles. Still, on the bright side, at least they get the worst cabins on the ship, sometimes with 4 in a room and sometimes even 2 cabins sharing one bathroom. And located below the waterline where all the heat and engine noise is. I mean, pirates get a bad name, but at least, under the captain, they're all equal. Next week's cruise tube is 10 types of cruise passenger. Which one are you? If you haven't worked on ships, then you might not even have noticed. But after watching the video, you won't be able to stop seeing hyacinths and forages on your next trip. Onboard friendships are intense. I'm mainly telling you this as an outside observer. I don't really have any friends on land or at sea. People working on ships tend to have a load of casual friendships in the group or department that they work in, a smaller extended web of friendships with people from other sections of the ship, and then that one friend who is the centre of the universe. You quickly get to know who these tag teams are, and when one person is spotted without the other, it becomes natural to say, "Hey Robin, where's Batman?" When you work, live and socialise in such close proximity, you get through what seems like years worth of chit-chat in a week or two, and deep bonds are formed real quick. Well, it seems that way. The day after someone's contract is over and they disembark, it's like they never existed. When Andy, Mandy or Sandy leave and you mention them to their tag team partner later that same day, they'll look confused, and it'll take them a while to work out who you're even talking about. Like it's a distant memory, someone that they sort of remember from the past. Of course, by 4 p.m, whoever is Andy, Mandy or Sandy's replacement will be the new BFF, or BFFN, best friend for now. The universe has a new centre, for 6 to 9 months. Relationships on board make friendships look tame. In addition to living, working and socialising with the same small group of people in the same small floating block of flats, well, bedsits, people working on ships want, maybe even need, some kind of affection, and relationships are even more supercharged than BFFs. By the end of day 3 on ships, you're in month 3 of land-based flirting. By the end of the first ship date, you've been living together on land for 6 months. By the time you're officially a ship couple, You're choosing a school for the second kid on land, and by week 2 at sea, you're in the middle of an acrimonious land divorce. Even me. I hate everyone. I like to spend my time alone, and honestly, I don't even like the doctor touching me. But from 6 months on board Aurora, I dated the captain's secretary perpetual, I left the ship with Crystal the perfumist, and a short time after that, Marika, a Namibian spa girl, came to England to spend Christmas with me whilst we planned our future together. Gossip travels fast. And just like the internet, nobody fact checks. So whatever nonsense someone happens to pipe up with is instantly repeated, and within an hour, it's fact. I got my first taste of this about a month into my first contract. I'd been in Gibraltar that day, and I was working on the tables with Katerina. Usually our favourite day working together. Watch sale. We both liked watches, we had a similar sense of humour, and we enjoyed each other gently making fun of guests pondering over the purchase of a £49 fossil watch as if it was a life or death decision. A passenger would take a deep breath and say some variation of, "Well, I'm going to have a think about it," or "Let me see what my wife thinks," or "I'll come back later." And as they walked away, we'd look at each other and say something like, "Yeah, you see if you can move some money around," or "Get hold of your broker and sell some shares." On this particular day, she was very serious and sharp whenever she spoke to me. I asked a couple of times if everything was okay or what was wrong, and she had just said, "Nothing." But it wasn't the nothing that means nothing. It was the nothing that means something, and something bad. I just did my job and ignored the atmosphere hanging over the tables like a bad smell. The watches ticked extra loud and extra slow, like the clock in a cartoon, and that 4-hour shift seemed to last 3 days. As we were packing up the watches and changing the stock on the tables for next day's sale, Katerina suddenly demanded, "When were you going to tell me about Catalina, Babaloo?" Babaloo was a word she used to mean idiot, and depending on the context, it could be meant nastily, or it could just be like an affectionate little tease. She wasn't teasing. Catalina was the Romanian girl who worked in the Emporium, the shop downstairs that sells batteries and Pringles and sun cream. I had no idea what she was talking about. We had a predictable back and forth. "What do you mean? As if you don't know. What are you talking about? Oh, just forget it." Eventually, whilst we were stacking perfume displays onto the tables for tomorrow, she relented and it all came out. Now, I'd spent a chunk of the day with Catalina. As I was leaving the ship, she was coming back from somewhere and we met at the bottom of the gangway. We said hello and she asked if I was going anywhere special. "I'm just going for a wander around because I haven't been to Gibraltar before." She asked if she could come with me because nobody seemed to be around and she was bored. I was mildly surprised by the request, but I was quite pleased. I was still the new boy, and we hadn't really made friends as yet because I'd spent most of my time stood one deck up from her, working with Katerina, Hugh, and Chris on the promo tables. We'd been in the same place at the same time a few times, crew bar, whatever, but never just us. Always in a big group of shoppies. It was a pleasant enough day. We had some coffee, I paid, we had an ice cream, she paid, and we wandered along the coast and around the shops. Catalina looked at me like I had two heads when I excitedly pointed out C&A, because I'm too stupid to realise it. She neither knew nor cared that this shop had disappeared from British high streets years before. We walked back to the ship, and that was that. Had this happened a month later, then I would have known what Katerina was getting at, because I could have predicted the nonsense that was to follow. I never found out who had told the tale, but it didn't really matter. It was probably a number of ship gossip, bullet trains, and some Chinese whispers. Anyway, Katerina was furious that I was keeping secrets from her when she thought that we were friends. She told me that she knew all about me and Catalina, and told me that we'd been seen walking down the gangway holding hands, kissing in line for the cable car, and why was she the last to know that we'd been together for weeks? I sort of half laughed. I told her that she was mad, and I told her what had actually happened. Now, she said that she believed me, and things went back to normal. All of that happened between 4:30 and 6 p.m. But a few years later, when Katerina and I met up for dinner in Windsor, she casually threw in a reference to my relationship with Catalina as a sort of test, I think. So she obviously still had a little bit of doubt. I mean, maybe she was making a joke. Russians aren't really known for their comedy, are they? The crew bar. everything about it. The first time you walk into the crew bar, you wonder if this was the inspiration for the Star Wars Cantina. There are some angry-looking Eastern Europeans over there in the corner, power-drinking shots of vodka. Over on that side, there's some older Indian kitchen staff playing dominoes. The Spa team are slamming beers and watching South Africa play in the Rugby World Cup. A tiny Filipino cabin steward is banging out Whitney Houston on the karaoke absolutely brilliantly, but so loud that it makes your teeth rattle. Now, crew are not allowed to get drunk. Not a problem for me, I don't drink. Although, I do have a tale to tell about that some other time. Everything in the crew bar was 25p. A Coke, 25p. A vodka, 25p. Double vodka and Coke, 25p. The rules are that you cannot have more than the UK drink drive limit, and if you do, then you'll be fired. The reality is that as long as you don't cause any problems, you aren't seen staggering around in guest areas, and you haven't fished off the security staff, then you can drink what you like. You might get in trouble if the abandoned ship signal comes and you're caught unable to do your duties, but by that point, there are probably bigger issues to deal with. The prison economy. There is a roaring trade in internet cards, black market pot noodles, and USB drives with movies on. It reminded me of the sitcom Porridge, the way that people would have side hustles and everyone knew a man who knew a man who knew a man. You could get a haircut for £1 down on deck 2. For £10 a month, one of the cabin stewards would clean your cell every day. And if you happen to have been a new shoppy who gave away a pallet of out-of-date Galaxy chocolate to the crew, instead of getting the company you work for a bill for £300 to remove it on turnaround day in Southampton, well, if you fancy a calzone at 4 a.m, just ring the kitchen and one will magically appear. A big source of income and favour trading was IPM, in-port manning. Now, when a ship is in port, a minimum number of staff must remain on board to satisfy the safety regulations. Every department takes part, and if you're on duty, then you must go to the office and hang your crew ID on a notice board with all the other IPMs to show that you're doing the job that day and stop you from leaving the ship when you shouldn't. You scan the card in and out when you leave and board the ship, just the same as the guests. The shoppies are all British or European and are mainly working on board to travel, so they never want to be on IPM. Fortunately, other departments and nationalities are there to earn money to send home, and they often have jobs that mean they can't get off most of the time anyway. They will happily stick their ID card on your hook for a couple of 25p crew bar beers or fetching them some Pringles from the Emporium or whatever. I haven't been to prison just yet, but when my dark deeds do eventually catch up with me, well, at least I've had a practice. I expect HMP has better Wi-Fi anyway. Up next is 10 types of cruise passenger, which one are you? Followed by my reviews from Scarlet Lady. Until then, 6 things that shocked me working on ships. Done.